The wind howled through the skeletal trees lining Willow Creek Lane, a quiet suburban street in Boise, Idaho, where Christmas lights flickered weakly against the December dusk. Emma Carter, 22, trudged up the cracked driveway of her family's modest ranch-style home, her breath forming clouds in the frigid air. Her wool coat, dusted with snowflakes, carried the faint scent of burnt office coffee, a reminder of the 10-hour shift she'd just endured at the insurance agency downtown. Her shoulders ached, not just from the weight of her tote bag, but from the invisible burden she'd carried for years, keeping her family afloat. Inside the house was a dim cocoon of neglect. The living room's Christmas tree, a lopsided fir bought at a discount, leaned against the wall, its sparse branches draped with tangled string lights that buzzed faintly, 3 seasons past their prime. A single ornament, a chipped ceramic snowflake Emma had made in 5th grade, hung crookedly, catching the weak glow of a table lamp. The air smelled of roasted turkey and something sour, like spilled whiskey left to fester. Emma kicked off her boots, the soles leaving wet streaks on the faded linoleum, and hung her coat on a rusted hook by the door. She was home, but it didn't feel like it. Not tonight. Not for a long time. In the dining room, the table was set with mismatched plates, the kind you'd find in a thrift store bin. Susan, Emma's mother, was arranging a platter of sliced turkey, her movements jerky, her lips pressed into a thin line. Her auburn hair, once vibrant, was streaked with gray and pulled into a messy bun, as if she'd given up halfway through the effort. Across the table, Greg, Emma's father, sat at the head, his broad frame slouched in a creaking chair, his thick fingers curled around a tumbler of whiskey, the amber liquid catching the light from a flickering ceiling bulb. His eyes, bloodshot and distant, stared at the wall where a water stain bloomed like a bruise. Liam, Emma's 16-year-old brother, slouched in his seat, earbuds dangling from one ear, his phone screen casting a blue glow on his sharp cheekbones. The faint hum of a Christmas carol drifted from a battered radio in the kitchen, its cheerful notes clashing with the room's heavy silence. Emma slid into her chair, forcing a smile at Liam. "Hey, you surviving the holiday spirit?" she teased, hoping to coax a grin from him. Liam glanced up, his hazel eyes softening for a moment, but he only shrugged, his thumbs scrolling through his phone. Emma's smile faltered. She reached for the mashed potatoes, the serving spoon scraping against the bowl, and tried to ignore the knot tightening in her chest. Christmas Eve was supposed to be warm, joyful, a fleeting escape from the grind, but here it felt like a stage play where everyone had forgotten their lines. The silence stretched, broken only by the clink of forks and the occasional creak of the house settling. Susan passed the green beans, her hands trembling slightly, avoiding eye contact. Greg took a slow sip of whiskey, his jaw clenching as if he were chewing on something bitter. Emma's fork hovered over her plate, her appetite fading. She glanced around the table, searching for a spark of connection, but found only shadows. The weight of the past 2 years pressed down on her. Greg's unemployment, Susan's meager part-time shifts at the local bookstore, and Emma's paycheck stretched thin to cover electricity, water, internet, groceries, everything. Without her, the heat would have died last winter, leaving them shivering in this drafty house. She'd stayed, not because she couldn't leave, but because she thought they needed her, because she thought it was what family did. Then it happened. Greg's fist slammed down on the table, the impact rattling the plates and sending a spoon clattering to the floor. Emma flinched, her heart lurching into her throat. Liam's phone slipped from his hand, landing with a soft thud. Susan let out a sharp gasp, her hand flying to her chest. Greg's eyes, now blazing, locked onto Emma, pinning her in place like a predator sizing up its prey. "You're a leech, Emma," he growled, his voice low and venomous, "sucking this family dry. You're done here. Get out by New Year's." The words hit like a slap, sharp and disorienting. Emma's breath caught, her mind scrambling to process. She stared at him, hoping, praying, She'd misheard. "What? What did you just say?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Greg leaned forward, his knuckles whitening around the tumbler. "You heard me. This is my house. You've been freeloading long enough. Pack your bags and go." Susan let out a nervous laugh, high and brittle, like glass about to shatter. "Greg, come on. It's Christmas Eve," she said, her eyes darting between him and Emma. "Let's not do this now." But Greg's glare didn't waver. "I'm done, Susan. She's 22, not a kid. She's draining us, and I'm sick of it." Liam's head snapped up, his earbuds dangling, forgotten. "Draining us?" he said, his voice cracking with disbelief. "She's the only one keeping the lights on." Greg's hand twitched, as if he might strike the table again, but he only pointed a thick finger at Liam. "Stay out of this, boy." Then to Emma, "You've got 1 week. That's it." Emma's pulse roared in her ears, drowning out the faint carol from the kitchen. She set her fork down, her fingers trembling, and leaned back in her chair. The room felt smaller, the walls closing in, the air thick with betrayal. She could have moved out months ago. Her salary, though modest, was enough for a studio apartment in Boise's North End. She'd run the numbers, toured a few places, even saved a deposit, but she'd stayed. For them. For Liam, who needed a stable home to finish high school. For Susan, who cried when the utility bills piled up. For Greg, who'd lost his construction job 2 years ago and never recovered, his pride crumbling with every rejection letter. Emma's checks had kept the fridge stocked, the Wi-Fi running, the heat humming through the brutal Idaho winters. And now, on Christmas Eve, her father was calling her a parasite. She looked at Susan, searching for an ally, but her mother's gaze was fixed on the table, her hands twisting a napkin into knots. "Mom?" Emma said, her voice breaking. "You're just gonna let him say this?" Susan's lips parted, but Greg cut her off. "This is my decision, Emma. Susan knows it. You're not welcome here anymore." The words landed like a blade, slicing through the fragile thread of hope Emma had clung to. Liam shoved his chair back, the legs scraping loudly against the floor. "This is bullshit," he shouted, his face flushed. "If Emma goes, who's next? Huh? Me? You gonna kick me out when I turn 18? Greg's eyes narrowed, but he didn't answer. The silence that followed was worse than his words, heavy with unspoken threats. Emma's chest tightened, a mix of anger and fear churning inside her. She wanted to scream, to throw her plate at the wall, to demand why her sacrifices meant nothing. But she knew it wouldn't change anything. Greg's mind was made up, and Susan's silence was complicity. Only Liam, his fists clenched, seemed ready to fight for her. Emma stood, her chair wobbling behind her. "Fine," she said, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside. "If that's what you want, I'm gone." She grabbed her half-eaten plate, carried it to the sink, and let it clatter against the stainless steel. The sound echoed in the quiet kitchen, a small act of defiance. She turned to Liam, giving him a quick nod. "I'm okay, don't worry," and walked out of the dining room, her boots heavy on the creaky stairs. Upstairs, her bedroom was a time capsule of her life. A twin bed with a faded quilt, a chipped desk cluttered with insurance paperwork, a bulletin board pinned with photos of her and Liam at the Boise River Festival, grinning under a summer sky. The room had been her sanctuary, a place to escape Greg's late-night rants and Susan's anxious hovering. Now, it felt like a trap. The walls whispering that she'd overstayed her welcome. Emma pulled a suitcase from under the bed, the zipper catching as she yanked it open. She began packing with mechanical precision. Jeans, sweaters, her favorite hoodie with the frayed cuffs. Each item was a reminder of her overtime shifts, her skipped lunches, her life funneled into this house. As she folded a scarf, a soft knock came at the door. "Emma?" Liam's voice was barely audible, laced with panic. "You locked it?" She opened the door, and Liam slipped inside, his shoulders hunched against the weight of the night. His eyes were red, though he hadn't let himself cry. "Are you really leaving?" he asked, glancing at the half-packed suitcase. "Like, right now?" Emma nodded, her throat tight. "They said it, Liam. I can't stay where I'm not wanted." He sank onto the bed, staring at the floor. "But the bills, the electricity, the internet, all of it. You know they can't pay for that. Dad's broke, and Mom's paycheck barely covers her gas." "I know," Emma said softly, sitting beside him. "But I can't be their bank account forever. I deserve a life, too." Liam's hands clenched into fists. "I want to come with you. I can't stay here with them." Naya's heart ached. She wanted to take him, to shield him from Greg's anger and Susan's apathy, but he was 16, still in high school, legally tied to this house. "You can't," she said gently. "Not yet. But when you're 18, I'll help you get out. I promise." He looked up, his eyes searching hers. "Where are you even gonna go?" "Ashley's," Emma said, naming her co-worker who lived in a cramped but cozy apartment near downtown. "She's got a pull-out couch. I'll figure it out from there." Liam nodded slowly, but his expression darkened. "Dad's acting weird, Em. Earlier he was on the phone in the garage, talking about some plan. I couldn't hear much, but he sounded smug, like he's got something up his sleeve." Emma frowned, a chill creeping down her spine. "What kind of plan?" I don't know, but he kept saying she'll learn, and we'll be fine without her. It didn't sound right. Emma's stomach twisted. Greg's outburst at dinner had felt personal, but Liam's words hinted at something calculated, something bigger than a drunken tantrum. She pushed the thought aside, focusing on the task at hand. "Thanks for telling me," she said, squeezing Liam's shoulder. "Just keep your head down, okay? And text me if anything feels off." "Every day?" Liam asked, a faint smile breaking through his worry. "Every day," Emma promised, mirroring his smile. Liam left the room, casting one last glance at the suitcase, his footsteps fading down the hall. Emma resumed packing, her movements faster now, driven by a growing unease. She checked every drawer, every corner, making sure she left nothing valuable behind. Her laptop, her passport, a small box of keepsakes. She stuffed them all into the suitcase, zipping it shut with a final tug. By midnight, the house was silent, the kind of quiet that felt like a held breath. Emma wheeled her suitcase down the stairs, the wheels catching on the worn carpet. The living room glowed faintly through a crack in the door, the TV flickering with a holiday special. She paused, half expecting Susan to call her name to offer an apology, a plea to stay. But no one stirred. The only sound was the canned laughter from the TV, mocking the emptiness of the moment. Emma opened the front door, the icy wind biting her face. She loaded her suitcase into the trunk of her beat-up sedan, the same car she'd bought with her first year's savings. As she slid into the driver's seat, her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "You think you can just walk away? You'll see what happens when you cross family." Her blood ran cold. The message had no signature, but it didn't need one. Greg's voice echoed in her mind, his words from dinner now layered with menace. She screenshot the text, her fingers trembling, and locked the car doors. The street was dark, the neighbors' Christmas lights casting eerie shadows across the snow. Emma gripped the steering wheel, her resolve hardening. Whatever Greg was planning, she wouldn't let it drag her back. She drove toward Ashley's apartment, the city lights blurring through a haze of adrenaline and betrayal. Boise's quiet streets, usually comforting, now felt like a maze hiding unseen threats. Emma's mind raced with questions. What was Greg's plan? Why had he turned on her so suddenly, and why did that text feel like the opening move in a game she didn't understand? At a stoplight, she glanced at her phone again, the message still glowing on the screen. A memory surfaced. Greg rifling through her desk last month, claiming he was looking for a pen. Had he been snooping? Had he found her bank statements, her savings account balance, the proof of her independence? The thought sent a shiver through her, but the light turned green, and she pressed the gas, forcing herself to focus. Ashley's apartment building loomed ahead, a squat brick structure with a flickering neon sign. Emma parked, her breath steadying as she hauled her suitcase up the stairs. Ashley answered the door in pajamas, her blonde hair mussed, her eyes widening at the sight of Emma's pale face. "Jesus, Em, you look like you've seen a ghost," she said, pulling her inside. "Close enough," Emma muttered, setting her suitcase by the couch. The apartment was warm, cluttered with books and string lights, a stark contrast to the cold emptiness of her family's house. Ashley didn't press for details, just handed Emma a mug of hot cocoa and pointed to the pull-out couch. "Stay as long as you need," she said, her voice firm. "We'll figure this out." Emma nodded, sinking onto the couch, the mug warming her hands. But as Ashley disappeared into her bedroom, Emma's phone buzzed again, another text from the same number. "You can't hide forever, Emma. Family always finds you." She stared at the screen, her pulse hammering. The words weren't just a threat. They were a promise, laced with the kind of certainty that made her skin crawl. Greg wasn't just angry. He was plotting something that went beyond kicking her out. And whatever it was, Emma knew one thing for sure: she wasn't safe. As the city slept outside, Emma lay awake, the couch springs digging into her back. She replayed the night, the slammed fist, the accusing eyes, Liam's warning, the cryptic texts. Each moment was a puzzle piece, but the picture they formed was still out of reach. All she knew was that she'd crossed a line, not by leaving, but by daring to choose herself. And in Boise, where secrets lingered like snowdrifts, that choice was about to come with a cost she couldn't yet imagine. The fluorescent lights in Ashley's Boise apartment buzzed faintly, casting a sterile glow over the pull-out couch where Emma Carter sat, her knees drawn to her chest. The mug of cocoa Ashley had pressed into her hands hours ago had gone cold, its surface skimmed with a thin film. Outside, the city was a hushed expanse of snow and sodium vapor streetlights. But inside, Emma's mind was a storm. The cryptic texts from the unknown number, "You can't hide forever, Emma. Family always finds you," burned in her memory, each word a splinter under her skin. She clutched her phone, its screen dimmed to save battery, and checked the time. 2:47. Em's sleep was a distant hope, chased away by the echo of her father's fist on the dinner table, the venom in his voice calling her a leech. And Liam's warning about Greg's mysterious plan. Emma set the mug on the coffee table, its surface cluttered with Ashley's dog-eared paperbacks and a half-empty candle jar. The apartment smelled of lavender and microwave popcorn, a stark contrast to the sour whiskey and neglect of her family's house on Willow Creek Lane. She unfolded herself from the couch, her joints stiff from tension, and padded to the window. The street below was empty, the snow undisturbed except for the tire tracks of her sedan, but the quiet felt deceptive, like the calm before a predator strike. Greg's texts weren't just threats, they were a declaration of intent, and Emma couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. She opened her phone, rereading Liam's earlier message. Dad was on the phone in the garage, talking about some plan. He sounded smug. The words gnawed at her. Greg wasn't the type to bluff. His anger was a blunt instrument, but his cunning was surgical. 2 weeks ago, she'd caught him lingering near her desk, flipping through her bank statements with a smirk he'd tried to hide. At the time, she'd brushed it off as his usual nosiness, But now, in the cold clarity of Ashley's apartment, it felt like reconnaissance. Had he been plotting this expulsion all along? And if so, what was the end game? Emma's fingers hovered over her banking app, a reflex born of paranoia. She logged in, her heart thudding as she checked her account balance, $3,842.17, enough for a deposit on a studio apartment, maybe a month's rent if she stretched it, but not enough to feel safe, not with Greg's shadow looming. She navigated to the linked accounts, electricity, water, internet, the secondary credit cards she'd opened for Susan's emergency. Her hands shook as she began the process of disconnecting her payment information, each click a small rebellion. The utility portal flashed a warning. "Are you sure you want to remove this payment method? Bills will no longer be automatically paid." She confirmed, her pulse racing with defiance. If Greg and Susan wanted her gone, they could face the consequences of their own making. By the time she finished, the sky outside was bruising toward dawn, the snow glowing faintly under streetlights. Emma leaned back, exhaustion tugging at her eyelids, but sleep refused to come. She kept replaying the dinner, the way Susan's eyes had darted away, the way Liam's voice had cracked with fear. If Emma goes, who's next? Me? The question hung like a guillotine, sharp and inevitable. Liam was only 16, trapped in that house with two people who'd proven they could discard their own child without a second thought. Emma's resolve hardened. She'd get him out, no matter what it took. The next morning, Ashley emerged from her bedroom, her blonde hair a messy halo, and brewed a pot of coffee. "You look like hell," she said, sliding a mug toward Emma. "Want to talk about it?" Emma managed a weak smile. "Not yet. Just family stuff." Ashley nodded, her eyes soft with understanding. "Well, this couch is yours as long as you need it, but if you're planning to stay in Boise, you'd better lock down a place soon. The North End's filling up fast." Emma sipped the coffee, its bitterness grounding her. "I know. I've got some savings. I'll start looking today." But looking for an apartment felt like a distant priority when her phone buzzed with a text from Susan. "Emma, the power's out. Greg's losing it. What did you do?" The words were a punch to the gut, equal parts panic and accusation. Emma stared at the screen, her thumb hovering over the reply button. Part of her wanted to ignore it, to let them drown in their own chaos. But another part, the part that had spent years bailing them out, hitched to explain. She typed a response, her fingers steady. "You wanted me gone. I stopped paying the bills. Figure it out." She hit send, her chest tight with a mix of guilt and liberation. The reply came almost instantly. "How could you do this to us? We're your family." Emma's jaw clenched. Family didn't kick you out on Christmas Eve. Family didn't treat you like a cash machine. She silenced the thread and shoved her phone into her pocket, determined to focus on her next steps. But focus was hard to come by when her phone buzzed again, an hour later, this time with an email from her bank. Alert, suspicious login attempt from an unfamiliar device. Emma's blood ran cold. She opened the email, her eyes scanning the details. 3 failed login attempts, followed by a password reset request. The IP address was local, somewhere in Boise. Greg. It had to be. She'd seen him scribbling in a battered notebook last month, muttering about getting what's owed. Had he been logging her passwords, her account numbers? Emma's hands trembled as she logged into her bank account, changing the password to a 16-character string packed with symbols. She enabled 2-factor authentication, linking it to her phone and email, and removed all secondary users. But the violation lingered, a slick film on her skin. Greg wasn't just angry, he was desperate, and desperation made him dangerous. She screenshot the alert and forwarded it to Ashley, who was lacing up her sneakers for a run. "Jesus, Ashley," reading the email, "your dad's unhinged. You need to call the cops." "Not yet," Emma said, though her voice wavered. "I need proof it's him, but I'm locking everything down." Ashley frowned but didn't push. "Just Be careful, okay? And keep me posted. Emma nodded, her mind already racing to the next threat. She opened her laptop, a battered Dell she'd bought with her first paycheck, and logged into every account she could think of. Emails, streaming services, even the grocery delivery app. She changed passwords, added security questions, and unlinked her family's devices. It took an hour, but when she finished, she felt a flicker of control, a lifeline in the chaos. That control shattered 3 days later when a pounding on Ashley's door jolted Emma awake. It was 7:14 p.m., the sky outside a deep indigo, the apartment warm with the scent of takeout pizza. Ashley was at a work happy hour, leaving Emma alone on the couch, scrolling through apartment listings. The knocks were heavy, deliberate, each one a hammer against her nerves. She crept to the door, her socks silent on the hardwood, and peered through the peephole. Greg stood in the hallway, his face flushed, his eyes wild under the flickering fluorescent light. He wore a stained flannel jacket, his fists clenched, his breath visible in the cold air seeping through the doorframe. "Emma!" he bellowed, his voice echoing through the building. "Open this damn door! You owe us!" Emma's heart slammed against her ribs. She backed away, her phone already in her hand, dialing 911. The operator's voice was calm, a lifeline in the storm. "Boise Police Department, what's your emergency?" "Me father's at my friend's apartment," Emma said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "He's banging on the door, screaming. I don't feel safe." "Stay inside, ma'am. Do not open the door. Officers are en route. Can you confirm your address?" Emma rattled off Ashley's address, her eyes fixed on the door as Greg's pounding grew louder. Through the peephole, she saw neighbors peeking out, their faces a mix of curiosity and disapproval. The Carters' financial troubles were no secret on Willow Creek Lane, and now Emma's drama was spilling into this quiet downtown building, fueling gossip that would surely follow her. She could almost hear the whispers. "That Carter girl, always trouble. Her dad's a drunk, you know." Greg's voice rose, slurred but vicious. "You think you can cut us off? Emma, you think you're better than us? I'll make you pay." The threat sent a chill down her spine, but Emma held her ground, the phone pressed to her ear. "He's threatening me," she told the operator. "He's saying he'll make me pay." "Officers are 2 minutes out," the operator said. "Stay calm and stay safe." Emma nodded, though the operator couldn't see her. She grabbed a kitchen knife from the counter, its weight cold and unfamiliar in her hand, and stood by the door, ready to defend herself if Greg broke through. The pounding stopped abruptly, replaced by the sound of heavy footsteps retreating. She peered through the peephole again, catching a glimpse of Greg pacing the hallway, muttering to himself. He pulled out his phone, typing furiously, his face twisted with a smirk that made her stomach lurch. What was he planning? Who was he texting? Sirens pierced the air and red lights flashed through the window. Emma exhaled, setting the knife down as the sound of boots echoed up the stairwell. A gentle knock came at the door. "Boise Police, it's safe to open." Emma unbolted the door, her hands shaking. 2 officers stood in the hallway, their faces calm but stern. Greg was pinned against the wall, his wrists cuffed, his eyes blazing with defiance. "She's my daughter," he shouted, struggling against the officers. "I have a right to see her." The lead officer, a woman with sharp eyes, turned to Emma. "Ma'am, are you okay? Did he make any specific threats?" Emma nodded, showing them the texts and recounting his screams. "He said I owe him, that he'll make me pay. He's been trying to access my bank account, too." The officer's jaw tightened. "We're taking him in for trespassing and harassment. You can file a restraining order at the station tomorrow. In the meantime, do you have somewhere safe to stay?" "I'm fine here," Emma said, though the words felt hollow. "My friend's coming back soon." The officers nodded, leading Greg away as he hurled one last barb. "This isn't over, Emma. You'll see." His voice echoed down the stairwell, chilling her to the bone. The neighbors' doors clicked shut, their curiosity sated for now, but Emma knew the rumors would spread like wildfire. She locked the door, triple-checking the deadbolt, and sank onto the couch, her body trembling with adrenaline. Ashley returned an hour later, her face paling as Emma recounted the incident. "You can't stay here," she said, her voice urgent. "If he's this unhinged, he'll come back. You need to move somewhere he doesn't know." Emma nodded, the weight of Ashley's words settling in. "I'll call Claire," she said, naming another co-worker who'd offered her spare room months ago. "She's in Meridian, far enough from here." "Good," Ashley said. "And get that restraining order. This guy's not messing around." Emma spent the night packing her suitcase, her movements mechanical, her mind racing with questions. Greg's outburst wasn't just rage, it was calculated, part of the plan Liam had overheard. But what was it? A scam to drain her savings? A way to force her back under his control? And why was Susan so silent, her texts laced with panic but no apology? Emma's gut told her Susan was complicit, a reluctant pawn in Greg's game. The next morning, Emma drove to Claire's apartment in Meridian, a quiet suburb west of Boise. Claire, a soft-spoken paralegal with a knack for baking, welcomed her with a hug and a plate of oatmeal cookies. "You're safe here," she said, leading Emma to a small guest room with a twin bed and a window overlooking a snowy park. "No one's banging down my door." Emma managed to smile, but the knot in her chest didn't loosen. She unpacked her suitcase, her belongings, a stark reminder of how little she'd taken from the house. Her laptop, her clothes, a few photos of her and Liam. That was it. Everything else, including her sense of home, had been stripped away. That afternoon, while Claire was at work, Emma sat at the kitchen table, her laptop open to the utility portal. She double-checked her cancellations, ensuring no trace of her payment information remained. The finality of it hit her hard. She was no longer the lifeline keeping her family afloat. But the relief was fleeting, overshadowed by a new text from Susan. "Emma, the internet's gone." Greg screaming about the car once it was happening. Emma's fingers tightened around her phone. The car. Her sedan parked at Ashley's, the one she'd bought with her own money. She called Liam, her voice sharp with urgency. "Liam, is my car at the house?" Liam's reply was hesitant. "Yeah, I saw it this morning. Mom was driving it, said she needed it for groceries. I thought you knew." Emma's blood boiled. I didn't know. She stole it." "Stole?" Liam's voice cracked. She's been acting weird too, keeps whispering with Dad in the garage. I heard her mention your laptop, something about covering the bills." Emma's heart sank. Her laptop, the one she'd left on her desk, assuming it was safe. "Liam, check my room. Is it still there?" A pause, then Liam's voice, low and tense. "It's gone. I'm sorry, Em. I didn't know." Emma hung up, her vision blurring with rage. Susan hadn't just taken her car. She'd pawned her laptop, her lifeline for work and independence. She drove to Willow Creek Lane, her hands gripping the wheel of Claire's borrowed SUV. The neighborhood was quiet, the Christmas lights dimmed by daylight, but the familiar ranch house loomed like a prison. Emma parked her sedan sitting brazenly in the driveway, a grocery bag on the passenger seat. She rang the doorbell, her jaw set. Susan answered, her face pale, her hands clutching a frayed cardigan. "Emma, what are you doing here?" she asked, her voice a mix of fear and defiance. "You took my car," Emma said, her tone cold. "And my laptop. Where is it?" Susan's eyes darted away. I borrowed the car. It was just sitting there. And the laptop? I sold it. We needed the money." "Sold it?" Emma's voice rose, incredulous. "That was mine. You had no right." Susan stepped back, her hands raised. We're drowning, Emma. Your father's debts, the bills. You left us with nothing. You left me with nothing, Emma snapped. You let him kick me out. You don't get to play victim. Susan's lips trembled, but she said nothing. Emma pulled out her phone, dialing 911. I'm reporting a theft, she told the operator, her eyes locked on Susan. My mother stole my car and sold my laptop without permission. Susan's face crumpled. Emma, please. I'm your mother. Then act like it, Emma said, her voice breaking. She hung up, turning away as the sound of sirens approached. The police arrived, and Emma showed them the car's title, the grocery receipt with Susan's name, and a photo of her laptop. Susan stammered, offering no proof of ownership, her excuses unraveling under the officer's questions. We'll recover what we can, the lead officer said. You can file a formal theft report at the station. Emma nodded, her gaze fixed on Susan, who stood trembling in the doorway. This is your last chance, Emma said softly. Stay away from me, or I'll make sure you regret it. She drove back to Claire's, her sedan reclaimed but her heart heavy. The victory was hollow, overshadowed by the realization that her family wasn't just broken, they were dangerous. That night, her phone buzzed with a new text from the unknown number. You'll pay for abandoning us, Emma. You can't outrun what's coming. Emma's breath caught. Greg was out on bail, released that morning according to the county jail's public portal. The text was his, but the wording felt different, colder, like it had been vetted by someone else. She screenshotted, forwarding it to the police with a note. My father is threatening me again. I don't feel safe. Claire, home from work, read the text over Emma's shoulder. This is escalating, she said, her voice tight. You need to move again, somewhere he can't find you. Emma nodded, the weight of her situation crushing her. I'll look for a place tomorrow, somewhere permanent. But permanence felt like a fantasy when Greg's next move hit. The following day, Emma received an email from her insurance agency. Unauthorized access attempt on your employee account. Someone had tried to log into her work portal, using her credentials to access client data. The IP address was different from the bank attempts, traced to a public library in Boise. Greg didn't have the tech skills for this. Someone was helping him, someone with enough savvy to cover their tracks. Emma's stomach churned as she called her boss, explaining the breach. Change your passwords, her boss said, her tone clipped. And keep this quiet. We can't afford a scandal. The warning stung, but Emma complied, her paranoia deepening. Who was Greg working with? A friend? A hired hacker? And why her work account? The answer came that evening when Liam texted. Dad's been meeting some guy in the garage. Big dude, tattoos, drives a black pickup. They're talking about you. Said something about leverage and making her come back. Em's heart raced. Leverage. Greg wasn't just after her money. He wanted control, and he was building a network to get it. The tattooed stranger was a new variable, a wild card that made her skin crawl. She called Liam, her voice low. Can you get a name? Anything? I'll try, Liam said, his voice hushed. But it's getting bad here. Mom's crying all the time, and Dad's different. Like he's enjoying this. Emma's grip tightened on the phone. Just stay safe, Liam. Don't confront them. I'll figure this out. She hung up, her mind spinning. Greg's plan was taking shape, a web of manipulation and intimidation designed to break her. But Emma wasn't the obedient daughter she'd been at 17, cowering under his rants. She was 22, with a job, a plan, and a fire in her chest that refused to be snuffed out. The next morning, Emma drove to the Boise police station, filing a restraining order against Greg and Susan. She presented the texts, the bank alerts, the work breach, and Liam's warnings, her voice steady as she laid out the pattern of harassment. The clerk, a tired woman with a tight bun, nodded. "We'll serve the notice today. If they violate it, call us immediately." Emma left the station, the restraining order a small shield against the storm. She spent the afternoon apartment hunting, settling on a studio in Boise's Bench neighborhood, a quiet area far from Willow Creek Lane. The lease was signed that evening, her savings depleted but her resolve intact. She moved in the next day, Claire helping her carry boxes up the narrow stairs. The apartment was small, with peeling paint and a temperamental heater, but it was hers. For the first time in years, Emma felt a spark of hope. That hope was tested a week later, when her phone buzzed with a voicemail from an unknown number. She played it, her blood running cold as Greg's voice filled the room. "You think a piece of paper stops me, Emma? I know where you work, I know where you sleep, and I've got friends who don't care about your little restraining order. You'll come back, or you'll lose everything." Emma's hands shook as she saved the voicemail, forwarding it to the police. But the real blow came an hour later when Liam called, his voice panicked. "Em, that guy was here again, the tattooed one. He left a note on your car, your old car, the one Mom took. It said, 'Pay up or bleed.'" Emma's vision blurred, fear and fury colliding. Greg wasn't just threatening her, he was escalating, pulling in muscle to intimidate her. The note was a line crossed, a declaration of war. She called the police again, reporting the note and the voicemail, her voice trembling but resolute. "I need protection," she said. "My father's working with someone dangerous." The officer promised to increase patrols around her apartment, but Emma knew it wasn't enough. She installed a security camera outside her door, its red light a small comfort in the dark. That night, she sat on her new mattress, the apartment silent except for the hum of the fridge. She opened her laptop, drafting an email to her boss, requesting a transfer to the agency's Meridian office. Away from Greg's reach, it was a long shot, but she had to try. The next day, Liam texted a bombshell. "Em, I found Dad's notebook. It's got your bank info, your work schedule, even your new address. He's been tracking you, and there's a name, Vince Russo. I think that's the tattooed guy." Emma's heart stopped. Vince Russo? The name was unfamiliar, but its presence in Greg's notebook was a neon warning. She Googled it, her fingers flying over the keys. A local news article popped up. "Vincent Russo, 38, arrested for extortion, released on probation." The mugshot showed a broad man with a shaved head and a snake tattoo curling around his neck. Emma's breath hitched. This was Greg's ally, a criminal with a rap sheet and a grudge against the world. She forwarded the article to the police, her hands shaking. "My father is working with Vincent Russo," she wrote. "They're threatening me, and I believe they're planning something worse." The response was swift. "We're investigating. Stay vigilant and avoid contact." But avoidance was impossible when Greg's next move hit. 2 days later, Emma's boss called, her voice tight. "Emma, someone filed a complaint against you, said you mishandled client funds. We're launching an internal review." Emma's stomach dropped. "That's impossible," she said, her voice rising. "I'd never touched client money." "I know," her boss said, "but the complaint came with screenshots. Your login, your IP address. It looks bad." Emma hung up, her mind reeling. Greg. It had to be. The work breach, the screenshots. It was all part of his plan to discredit her, to sabotage her job, her lifeline. She called Liam, her voice urgent. "Did Dad mention anything about my work? Anything about clients?" Liam hesitated. "Yeah, last night. He was bragging to Vince about hitting you where it hurts. Said he had a friend at the agency, someone feeding him info." Emma's blood ran cold. A mole at her job? Greg's web was wider than she'd imagined, his reach extending into her workplace, her sanctuary. She spent the night combing through her work emails, searching for signs of tampering, but found nothing. The review loomed like a guillotine, threatening her career and her stability. But Emma wasn't done fighting. The next morning she drove to the Meridian office, meeting with the agency's HR director. She laid out everything: Greg's threats, the breach, the complaint, the notebook. "I'm being targeted," she said, her voice steady. "My father's trying to ruin me." The director, a stern woman with gray streaks in her hair, nodded. "We'll expedite the review. If the complaint's fabricated, we'll clear you. But you need to stay sharp." Emma left the meeting, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and determination. She texted Liam, "I'm fighting back. Stay safe and don't let them know you're helping me." Liam's reply was instant. "I've got your back, Em." Oh, that evening, Emma sat in her apartment, the security camera's feed open on her laptop. The street outside was quiet, but she knew the calm was temporary. Greg's plan was unraveling, but he wouldn't stop, not until he dragged her down with him. She opened her banking app, transferring her savings to a new account, untouchable by Greg's prying hands. It was a small victory, a brick in the wall she was building around her new life. Then, the climax came. At 11:47 p.m., her phone buzzed with a call from Liam, his voice frantic. "Em, Vince is here. He's in the garage with Dad, and they're loading something into his truck. It looks like files, papers. I think they're yours." He thought it graced. Files, her client records, her personal documents. Greg must have stolen them from her room before she left. "Liam, get out of there," she said, her voice sharp. "Lock your door and call 911. Tell them you saw a known criminal on the property." "I'm on it," Liam said, his voice trembling but resolute. Emma grabbed her keys, calling the police as she ran to her car. "Vincent Russo is at my family's house," she told the dispatcher. "He's with my father, stealing my documents. My brother's in danger." The drive to Willow Creek Lane was a blur, the city lights streaking past as Emma's mind raced. She parked a block away, watching as police cruisers pulled up to the house, their lights flashing. Officers swarmed the garage, pulling Greg and Vince out, their hands cuffed. Liam stood on the porch, his face pale but defiant, pointing to a stack of files in the truck. Emma approached, her heart pounding, and met Liam's eyes. "You okay?" she asked, her voice soft. He nodded, a faint smile breaking through. "Told you I had your back." The officers recovered the files. Emma's client records, her tax documents, even her birth certificate. Greg's notebook was there too, its pages a roadmap of his obsession, her schedules, her passwords, her life laid bare. Vince's involvement was the final piece, a hired thug meant to scare her into submission. As Greg was loaded into a cruiser, he locked eyes with Emma, his face a mask of rage. "You'll regret this," he hissed. "You're nothing without us." Emma stepped forward, her voice clear and unshaken. "I'm everything without you." The cruiser door slammed, cutting off his response. Susan stood in the doorway, her face crumpled, but Emma didn't look at her. She hugged Liam, the weight of their shared survival binding them closer than ever. 2 years later, Emma stood in her new apartment, a cozy one-bedroom in Meridian, its walls adorned with photos of her and Liam at his college orientation. Liam, now 18, had moved into a dorm, his life bright with possibility. Greg and Susan had lost the house to foreclosure, their lives unraveling without Emma's support. The restraining order held, and Vince's arrest had led to a parole violation, landing him back in prison. But the true climax came that autumn when Emma opened a letter from her agency. The review had cleared her, the complaint exposed as Greg's fabrication, orchestrated with a disgruntled coworker he'd bribed. Her transfer to Meridian was approved, her career intact, her future hers to shape. Emma sat by the window, the Boise skyline glowing under a harvest moon. She texted Liam, "We made it." His reply was a photo of him grinning in his dorm, a thumbs up to their shared victory. The scars of Willow Creek Lane lingered, but they were fading, replaced by a truth Emma had fought for. Freedom was worth the cost, and family was the one you chose.